Tuesday morning question. If your house was burning down, what three things would you grab? Obviously, your family members, that's a given. So that shouldn't be on your list of three. So, if your house was burning down, what three things would you grab? Okay. Well, yesterday, as we continued to examine this whole idea of what were the lessons that Jesus gave post resurrection. We looked at Thomas, doubting Thomas. Finally decided he was all in after Jesus revealed himself. Why, after Jesus predicted he would rise from the grave, and even after friends of Thomas's gave eyewitness account of seeing Jesus post-resurrection, why did he still doubt? Well, we concluded Thomas did what we do. He gleaned what he wanted and left what he didn't. But I think there's others that didn't believe for other reasons. See, past mistakes make us feel as though we're unworthy to follow Jesus. And I think that's where Peter found himself. So let's go back to John chapter 21. I'm going to kind of give a synopsis of verses 1 through 17. You might want to read it together as a family. It's just such a great story. Jesus has already appeared to his apostles. He's told them he would see him on the Sea of Galilee. He's made appearances. And now the apostles are there on the sea, and Jesus isn't with them. Peter goes, I'm going to go fishing. Gets in the boat. Guys come with him. Now remember, Peter has denied knowing Jesus 3 times. It's a cloud that hangs over him. That's a mistake that brings with it some shame. And so he goes back to what he knows. And he's trying to catch some fish. No fish, no catch. Trying, and now he's failing at the thing that he's supposed to be good at. And then there's some guy on the shoreline. And the sun must have been kind of glaring. You couldn't really tell who it was. And this guy on the shoreline hollers out, hey, you guys catching anything? And they obviously say, well, no. And then this fella on the shoreline says, throw your net on the other side. Which, how in the world do you know that there's fish on the other side? And of course, they throw their net on the other side, and they pull in a haul. And all of a sudden, John recognizes, of course, it's Jesus. You know, Jesus knows where fish are. And John announces to Peter. I think everybody would have known there's an elephant in the room. They love Peter, their bro. Peter's living with this shame of denying Jesus 3 times. And John looks at Peter and says, it's Jesus. I think it's interesting that he would go right to Peter, says, it's Jesus. Peter jumps out of the boat into the water and swims towards Jesus. The others bring the boat in, which is good. Somebody's got to bring the boat in. There's a tension there. It's like Peter wants to be with Jesus, but there's also this reluctance. There's this, oh my gosh, it's Jesus. But at the same time, I'm not worthy. I think we've all felt that from time to time. I want to be with Jesus, but oh, are you kidding? He knows what I've done. You know, the issue is Jesus has been raised. This is really the 3rd primary time that Jesus has appeared to his apostles. So the issue of the resurrection now is settled. They know he's conquered death. But the issue is, okay, what do we do now? That's really the issue on the table for the followers of Christ. And so they come to the shoreline. Peter has swum over. They brought the boat. All the guys are gathered around, and Jesus has prepared for them a meal. He's cooked some fish on the grill, and they eat. And I'm sure there's laughter, and I'm sure there's joy. And in the midst of this, Jesus fires off a question to Peter. Peter, do you love me? I mean, in the midst of the social that they're having, hey, Peter, do you love me? And in that response, Peter goes, well, you know I do. Yeah, you know I do. probably a little perturbed that he would ask him, a little embarrassed that he would be singled out. And Jesus said, well then, feed my lambs. Doesn't say go back to fishing, it says feed my lambs. Figurative language for get about the business of feeding my people. Then probably shortly thereafter, there's maybe more laughter, more joy, more discussion, and all of a sudden Jesus goes, hey, Peter, do you love me? Probably Peter's been a little standoffish from the conversation, feels, he's feeling I'm not worthy. Do you love me? Peter says, you know I do. Jesus says, shepherd my sheep. Probably conversation continued on a while, and then all of a sudden, third time, Jesus looks right through Peter, says, do you love me? 3 questions to negate 3 denials. Peter says, Jesus, you know all things. You know I love you. And he says, feed my sheep. Jesus wanted to get Peter beyond, on the other side of his sin and shame. To get about the business that he had called him to. And what was that? To make disciples. See, that's what Jesus does for us. We've made mistakes. We've sinned. There's shame. Shame is feeling bad for who you are. All of us have done something. We think maybe nobody knows. Maybe somebody does know. We made mistakes and we feel shame. We feel bad for who we are. And Jesus is looking at us and going, do you love me? Well, then follow me. Jesus wants to get us on the other side of our sin and shame. So here's the question, and this probably isn't a discussion question. This is one of those questions where you just kind of go to your 4 corners of your house and you go, I need some time alone. But the question is, what's the sin, what's the shame that I need to get on the other side of? What's that sin that you're beating yourself up over that God's going, hey, do you love me? Get on the other side of this. Forgive yourself and move on. And tend my lambs. Feed my sheep. What's the sin and the shame that you need to get beyond? Take some time to contemplate that before the sun goes down today. And we'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday.